Historical Society of Dayton Valley, and we are going to be restoring. We have 3 buildings in Dayton that are under our stewardship. One of them is this schoolhouse museum here. One of them is the fire station jail, which is also open this weekend down on Pike Street. And then down at the corner of US 50 and Main Street is the Carson and Colorado Railroad Depot. It looks to the mere casual observer like a house. Aha! It will not stay that way. We are going to be, we received a grant, a federal transportation enhancement grant or funding through the Nevada Department of Transportation that allowed us to buy that property, and we are going to be restoring that property. We are putting in the funding request right now for the money to do the restoration. We have high confidence in getting the funding, so there's going to be a lot of work going on there. We also, however, until we get that funding, we have no coverage of anything, so we are to do any work on it. So we are happily accepting donations, and there's something inside and there where you can put in donations, but we are happy to receive donations. As part of that, we have this weekend. We have a fellow who's not with us right at the moment named Jim Saylor, who's from Bishop. He looks a lot like him, but you're wrong. He's not. Actually, this weekend he is, today only, he's channeling Henry Yerington, and who's 180 years old. You have to admit he looks pretty good. But the guy that was here yesterday named Jim Saylor is a historian on the Carson in Colorado. He is up here as a consultant helping us to get information that will allow us to do a better application for the funding so that we make sure we get the money for the restoration. And he also is the former caretaker at Law's Railroad Museum in Bishop, and so as such has spent many years reconstructing the depot down there and various portions of it. He has a lot of experience. He's quite a historian. He's working on a book, and he's a perfectionist, so it'll be done in about 400 years. But anyway, but as I said, today he's not with us because today Mr. Yerington, who is one of the founders of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad and then later the Carson in Colorado, happens to be with us. And I think Mr. Yerington, in spite of the fact he's a little hard of hearing, I understand, I think he can probably speak for himself to tell you something about him. And I'm sure he will entertain questions and generally be be very interesting. So thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, can you hear me quite well in the back? If anybody cannot hear me, please feel free to come forward. Contrary to rumor and popular belief, I do not bite. I am known to bark at times, but I don't bite. I am Henry Marvin Yerington. I was born in Calbourne, Canada, in the year of our Lord 1828. My father worked in a foundry, and by the time I was 16 years of age, he had amassed enough patterns that we made our own foundry, and I worked with him there for a couple of years. At the age of 21, I left for St. Stanley to study engineering, and then I went to work for a short time for the Canadian government. In 1858, I married Miss Susan Mary Hume. We settled down, and I raised wheat for a while. We had 4 children, sons Edward, Hume, James, and a daughter, Jennifer. In the year of our Lord, 1863, we immigrated to the United States during what was known as your Civil War. And I am here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there was not one thing civil about it. Now, we came here to Nevada Territory, and on October 31st of 1864, the state of Nevada joined the Union. I was involved in ore mill construction and worked on the first mill along the Carson River, the Merrimack. There I met certain men such as Mr. William Ralston, president of the Bank of California, Mr. Darius Ogden Mills, who had helped form the bank, and of course their agent, Mr. William Sharon, who was their agent up there at Virginia City. In 1869, we formed the Virginia and Truckee Railroad Company, where I was elected Vice President and General Superintendent of the railroad. As things progressed and the mines and the mills came under the control of the Bank of California, we needed, aside from the railroad, to further our stranglehold. In 1872, with Dwayne Bliss, I helped form Yerington.This and Company, and we formed the Carson Tahoe Lumber and Fluming Company. So, from the Carson Lumber Tahoe Fluming Company, we were taking the wood, shipping it up to our mines and mills in Virginia City, mining our own ore, milling our own ore, shipping it on our own railroad, and all of these transactions were going through the Bank of California. As the mines and the mills of Comstock played out, and the Bonanza Kings took over, in 1875, one of my duties was I was a lobbyist in the Nevada State Legislature for the Republican Party. William Sharon had been elected as United States Senator, and he was in Washington, D.C., looking after the people's interests, while here in Nevada I was doing my part to help not only the Virginia and Truckee, but the Central Pacific to defeat hostile legislation to the railroads. In 1875, Mr. M.C. Gardner had brought forth a bill in the Nevada State Legislature to run a narrow-gauge 3-foot railroad from the Carson River down to the Colorado River in Southern California. Well, of course, I had to write Mr. Sharon and apprise him of the situation and ask what he, Mr. Mills, and Mr. Ralston wanted done. A few days later, Mr. Ralston himself met me in Virginia City with a telegram from Mr. Sharon wishing the bill to be killed. I wrote him back that I would do so sharp and that I would leave no stone unturned to beat this bill at every hazard. A few days later, I had to write Mr. Sharon about a rather rascally assessment bill that was headed his way. Would have given the Democrats 5 very lucrative offices, and it would have given them the power to tax any railroad out of existence, which obviously was not something that we wanted done. Well, we had killed the Carson and Colorado Railroad bill, and it was put on the back shelf for a few years. Then finally, as the mines and mills played out, William Sharon brought up the idea and quietly went out and got all the paperwork and all the old charters and all that, and tried to convince Darius Mills, who had now become president of the Bank of California, to build this railroad. And Mills wasn't too thrilled about building a Bodie extension of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. William Sharon convinced him. We had the Carson Tahoe Lumber and Fluming Company. Mr. Mills and his brother Edgar had the Eureka and Palisade Railroad, which were both 3-foot narrow gauge. And after many wonderful speeches by Mr. Sharon, finally convinced Mr. Mills to survey a route and to begin construction. On May the 5th of 1880, in the office of Dwayne Bliss in Carson City, we gathered 10 men together to subscribe to capital stock and to write up articles of association. 5 days later, on May the 10th, 1880, at 12 noon in Dwayne Bliss's office, we, the directors of the Carson and Colorado Railroad Company, had formed a board. I was elected president and general superintendent. James Oliver was elected as our chief engineer. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the Carson and Colorado Railroad was officially organized and incorporated. Now, back in those days, I had to send telegrams back east to Baldwin Locomotive Company, the Lamoth Car Company, Barney and Smith, and also to get rail from England. Now, when you communicate with England, it takes a while to get back there. And the rail, being 35 pound per yard, rolled in Rhymney in Wales and Sheffield in England. 30-foot stick of rail weighs 350 pounds. For 1 mile of track, it takes 352 sticks of rail, and we have to get all that rolled brought down to the docks, loaded upon a ship such as Herald of the Morning, which is a vessel approximately 203 feet long, some 35 feet wide and 26 feet deep, capable of hauling some 1,900 tons of rail at one time. I'll let you do the math and figure out just how many shiploads it took. Ties came from around Tahoe, our vast timber resources. I hired a man by the name of Robert James Laws, former roadmaster on the Central Pacific, as my assistant and construction superintendent. On May the 31st, 1880, special train came down from Carson City to Mound House. Aboard it, all the CNC directors and officials. We debarked, and I went out to a predetermined spot on the north side of the Mound House Depot, stuck a shovel into the ground, and proclaimed, by the power invested in me, in the name of the Carson, Colorado Railroad Company, I hereby turn the first sod. May this venture be carried to successful completion. After which Mr. Sharon led the resounding 3 cheers, and Mr. Laws set the crews to work. Construction was very slow because, first of all, you have your surveyors. They're spread out, setting the grade stakes and checking the route. After these come the sagebrush men. They're clearing the route. Next you have your plow crew, which consists basically of a horse, a plow such as the one that you see back over here, and 3 men. They would break up the high spots, fill in the low spots. Then the scraper crews with 8 horses and their teams coming in. Then finally the hand crews doing the finish grading and tamping down the roadbed. Then you have to get the ties, 2,640 of them per mile of track. These have to come all the way from Tahoe, be brought down, be milled to size, brought out to Mound House. We had enough rail and ties on hand. We were able to build the Mound House yard. And George White, our master carpenter for the Carson, Colorado Railroad, built one of the first buildings there at Mound House for the new railroad, which was a single stall engine house. You'll have to excuse me. I'd ordered locomotives from Baldwin, little 440 wood-burning engines, weight of about 48,000 pounds, excuse me. Cost of $9,000 apiece. The first locomotive, the Candelaria, would not arrive here until November of 1880. By this time, the rail which is being rolled in England is loaded on the ship. It has to come across the Atlantic, down the east coast of the United States and South America, all the way down around the Horn and all the way back up to San Francisco. On a good voyage, that might take 77 days. On the usual voyage, it took about 145 to 150 days. So we were literally waiting for our ships to come in. Once the rail, boxcars, flat cars, and our first locomotives arrived, within 10 days construction commenced, and we made it here to Dayton, Nevada. In December of 1880, we laid a total of 14 miles of track. In January of 1881, we laid 28 miles of track. That was weather permitting. We used mainly unemployed Comstock miners. Most of the white men were paid $1.75 a day, less 75 cents food and board. Chinese were paid only $1 a day, less 75 cents food and board. Track work continued down through Churchill, Wabasca, and along by shores through the Walker Lake Indian Reservation. Now, to cross the reservation, what we had to do was pay the tribe $750 and agree to haul them and their goods for free on the railroad. What we didn't tell them was we would let them ride on top or inside the box cars, but the plush of the coach would be denied them. The tracks reached Hawthorne, Nevada in April of 1881. 100 miles of track in 11 months. Not bad. We had 3 locomotives, 3 coaches, 3 combination coaches, some 40 box cars, and some 30 flat cars. From Mound House to Hawthorne, 100 miles. To the Colorado, it's another 500 miles. Our first major stop after Hawthorne is the mining town of Candelaria. That's only 55 miles away from Hawthorne. Also at Hawthorne, that was the major transfer point where from Wagon things would be shipped over to Bodie, only 36 miles away as the crow flies. Well, now you would think 100 miles in 11 months, okay. So 55 miles, and we've laid 28 miles in a month. 2 months, maybe 3 at most, right? I'm afraid not. It took until February of 1882 to get those 55 miles from Hawthorne up to Candelaria built. Then from there, you had to go down to Basalt and up over the White Mountains over Mount Montgomery Pass. From Junction to Benton, another 43 miles. Okay, yes, you do have a mountain to climb. 4 or 5 months, right? No. February 1882 to January 1883 it took to build because of all the cut and fill work, and 1 tunnel, 247 feet long, had to be bored through the White Mountains. Once they arrived at Benton, finally, we had everything perfect level grade going the next 100 miles down to the east side of the Owens Lake in Southern California in Inyo County. February of 1883, there was 1 accident. Chinese accidentally set off a blast prematurely in a cut, and 3 of them were killed immediately. Mr. W.P. Bailey, the foreman, was severely injured. He was put on a wagon for the 7-hour grueling ride to Bishop, where the doctors tried but were not able to save his leg. He did recover and lived many years after. On March the 4th, 1883, Robert Laws ran the first construction train into Inyo County. By April 1st, Bishop Creek, 224 miles from Mound House, was reached. Then in July of 1883, the little town of Hawley was finally reached.